This is Madman Dan, Operation No Time to Die, and this will be my final video in the series, most likely. If you've seen all the other players' videos, they've all done their recaps of what went on in the game from their perspective, and I'm going to do something similar. But what I'm going to focus on, and my apologies to my opponents, they all played great, but what I'm going to focus on is more mistakes and maybe things I would do differently if I were in their shoes. So, I hope no one, none of my opponents take this the wrong way, but I might be sounding a bit harsh in this video. But I think I'll just have to jump right to it. All right, so Germany. Panzer Jane's Germany did extremely well. He pretty much mopped up, well, not exactly mopped up, but he got his full victory points in the Eastern Front. All Russia really has to do all Germany really has to do is take at least two Soviet cities, and they can get their full allotment of victory points. And uh, and I guess what I'm saying is, you don't actually have to take Moscow. All you have to do is just hold on to a couple cities and cripple the Soviet economy, and you're good. Um, and maybe that's one thing, one reason why this game turned out the way it did. Uh, in my opinion, the entire, I guess, Axis strategy is for Germany to, disarm Russia, but while doing so, putting enough pressure on the Commonwealth and the Western allies, because, as you can see in this game, if you were watching, if you don't put enough pressure on the UK, America can pretty much spend their whole buy in the Pacific, and no matter what, it's going to be a real struggle for Japan to compete. And in this game, they were competing with America's high income, but it's Japan can only deal with so many heavy battleships and so many transports. So I think what Panzer J should have done in this game was, I would say, focus more on Britain, but in the same way that Global War Enthusiast was doing pinpricks to him, um, I think Germany should have been trying to pinprick uh, the Commonwealth as well. Not so much in taking territory back, but with more convoying and more raiding of their convoy lines. Um, I think in the entire game, Germany did not build a single sub, and their subs started off in Germany and somehow ended themselves all the way in Japan. So I don't think these subs were very well used. They did do some raiding down here, but I think eventually they just retreated to the Japanese home islands. I'm not too sure what the logic behind that was, but even if he just would have left the submarines on lines, and even if he didn't convoy them, he could deny, I think Great Britain has a bonus of $2 for not having German subs on any of their lines. So just leaving one of those subs, somewhere, that would have been, money you're taking off the British. And then plus combo rating, and maybe picking up uh, tar- picking up opportunistic targets like going after undefended transports, or if you want to, be risky and go after a carrier and maybe get a first strike, so the planes will have to get off it and it can't be used. Things like that. And I think once he sufficiently damaged Russia enough, and making, I guess, 80, 90, 100 IPP per turn, I think he really could have afforded to maybe drop a couple subs in Germany, or you can actually put two subs off Yugoslavia because they have a minor shipyard, or a couple subs off here. I think he could really afford to maybe produce one or two submarines per turn and just force the British to react to those, and maybe take money. Um, Another thing that you can do, and since we were playing with this rule set, was Convoy Raid with aircraft. So um, this game he had plenty of aircraft, lots and lots of fighters. But I think if you maybe put 1, 2, or 3 medium bombers, you can actually, with long-range aircraft, raid C-Zone 24 from Paris. Or if you want to fortify Normandy with a good stack of units, you could, well, raid 1 zone, 2 zone, these 3 zones. And that's kind of a lot to, well, it's not hard, but it's something for the UK to deal with. And, this line is worth, well, these 2 lines are worth $11. So even if Germany's able to take half that money per turn, that's a good use of, say, medium bombers here. And, while they're there, they can, counterattack any pinprick attacks if those occur. So I think that's, and one more thing to say. In this game, Free France turned out to be such a powerhouse. Lots of fighters. The Allies ended up building a minor factory, and we just kept feeding them money. I think one thing that Panzer J could have done with his Vichy fleet is just had them sit in the sea zone, because if they sat there, the Free French port would be blockaded, and they would not be able to receive any more lend-lease, and that would force them to either attack that fleet or maybe spend more money on building a port over here or, in other parts. But I think doing that with, the Vichy fleet, which isn't doing much, would have been a good move. All right, I think I've gone enough about Germany. So I think I'm going to talk about Knights Templar and his Russia. And through the magic of Tabletop Simulator, I'm going to load up a different save. Be right back. I think that Knights Templars, more misfortune on the Eastern Front was purely due to this attack that went on in Kalmykia, or whatever it's called. I didn't think the Germans would bring in all their fighters with only a couple airborne to fight that stack. I would have imagined that 4 infantry would have been enough, but Panzer J saw that as not a sufficient deterrent to go in and attack it, and he attacked it and wiped out the Russian Air Force. And that I think without those aircraft, Knights Templar was really on the defensive, and he really could not take the initiative to, counterattack the Germans before they got too strong in the Eastern Front. So that's really unfortunate, but that's the way it goes. And this is actually funny because if Russia developed long-range aircraft that turn, he was on stage 3, I believe. If in a different universe he would have developed that, he would have easily got back to Stalingrad and wouldn't have to worry about this situations. So this kind of goes to prove how the result of this game can come down to a simple 50-50 chance on attack roll. But yeah, no, and I think unfortunate to say, but after these planes were gone, the USSR couldn't really regain their initiative, or gotten to the degree where the Russian juggernaut really can start to fight back against the German thrust into Russia. So really unfortunate, but that's the way it goes. But another thing I feel that the USR could have done was built a railway to Sinkang and started lend leasing to the CCP, just maybe an artillery per turn or advanced artillery per turn. Um, and unlike, I guess, well, not that it would have mattered this game, but unlike the other nations in this game, the USSR can lend lease to anyone whenever they wish. So the CCP wouldn't have to be at war with anyone. Uh, I know in Knights Templar's video, he said that going into Mongolia and Persia was a mistake. I would disagree. I think that that should be the play that Russia does every game, because just taking um, that 5 IPP income while making 8 is really beneficial to the long term. And once you take those territories, you don't really have to defend them. You can pull your units back and well worry about the German attack, that eventual German attack on you. But yeah, I think those are the two things that I would have done. Well, I don't know if I would have done this differently because I could have made the same mistake. But uh, don't let your Air Force get caught out like that. And I think more support for the CCP, because CCP with 9 mountain and maybe 9 artillery is pretty terrifying. It's just a lot of first strikes and a lot of attacks and mountains at 3, and that gives you uh, a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of flexibility when dealing with Japan. Um, yeah. So that's my thoughts on Russia's. Now let's talk about Japan. So Boston Bruce and Japan. Um, I think the American blunder into the Marshall Islands, where I didn't have enough Japanese units updated on my board, uh, which resulted in the Americans not taking Marshall Islands this turn. Uh, really meant that this was an excellent opportunity for the Japanese to really hurt the American fleet, because this island was still in Japanese possession. Japan could literally bring every single aircraft into this battle and then just land in the Marshall Islands, meaning his carriers wouldn't even be needed. He could take 5 hits on carriers uh, before he lost any ships. So, and maybe he just didn't attack just because he didn't want to win, but because of an American player mistake. But if he didn't, this would have seriously damaged the American ability to push into the Pacific. It would have at least put them back 2 or 3 turns. And if you guys recall from the last 2 or 3 turns of this game, that's where Japan lost a bunch of victory points. So a 2 or 3 turn delay would have meant that Boston Bruce would have been able to hold on to all those points and could have won the game for his team. Um, just an example, I pulled everything that he could bring into the attack and put it on this virtual battle board down below. And you can see that with the Japanese attacking dice at top versus the American defending, it would have been an absolute sweep of the American fleet. And the most valuable thing is his air force would have most likely been able to escape scot-free. They could just land on that island and well, get out next turn. The fleet could die, but with an income of 60 IPP, that could have been rebuilt. But I believe that Japan could have just landed all his planes on the Marshalls and then just flew them out, Marshalls, Carolines, and could have just flown them out the next turn. And yeah, just if you look at these dice, it's just I was really lucky that he did not take this opportunity, because that probably would have lost the Allies the game. I think another thing too that Boston Bruce did was I think he spent too much money uh, on defenses. There's a couple instances where, well, he spent a lot of money. I don't know the exact number, but it must have been at least 60 to 100 IPP on forts or coastal guns. And for example, he built a couple here, and the KMT just went up to Szechuan first and walked around them. And when he built 3 or 4 more in the Marshall Islands, the Americans just used a paratrooper or two to take the islands and completely dodged those shots. And even when, the Americans ran into the guns, like the 4 coastal artillery in the Philippines, that only damaged 4 or 5 battleships. And on this side of the board, with um, with Singapore with its dockyards still in our hands, and I think at the time Hong Kong was in Allied hands, it's really not too long to get those hits repaired. So I think what Boston Bruce should have done was, instead of spending all that money on coastal guns and forts, he could have put an absolute butt ton of boats into the water, and that would have really made the Americans think twice about pushing across the Pacific. I really do think that boats are the better defense for Japan over land units and uh, coastal guns. All right, and now on to my thoughts on, I think, the UK. On to the UK Commonwealth, played by Global War Enthusiast. Um, Unfortunately, I don't think I know of a single mistake that a single significant mistake that he made all game. And I'm sure he would say he would try and credit myself with that, but I think that no, he played really well. He he even this whole Abyssinian thing, well, at least having it to give them a fighter each turn, that was entirely his brainchild. My idea was just to maybe just send a couple fighters there and then take Eritrea and finish the war. But no, he really pushed for sending all of France's money to Abyssinia to eventually become free French. And obviously, that was the best decision in the long term. And, when you really think about it, um, as the Allies, defending France from the first German attack doesn't really benefit the Allies. It benefits Russia a lot, because all those units will then proceed to march into Russia, but it um, doesn't really benefit the Allies to well, doesn't benefit them so much to take off German units that will be eventually used against, well, their other opponent. Um, if I wanted to be nitpicky about uh, how Global War Enthusiast played Great Britain, I would just say that I think he built 1 or 2 too many AA guns, or 3 too many AA guns, at least in the UK. I really felt that having other units like artillery or tanks would have more easily allowed us to push into France. Um, Not that eventually I don't think we could, but it would have given us a better chance. So that's the only thing I would say to Global War Enthusiast about is, hey, guns are good, but they don't really help you take territory. Uh, all right, with that, I think we're going to go on and talk about Italy. in regards to Panzer J and Italy, Abyssinia is, if it's supported, it certainly is a hard nut to crack. I think what Italy needed to do on the first turn was just risk his 6 units by trying to take Abyssinia. As you could tell by the rest of how this game turned out, not doing so and not taking that risk meant that Free France was able, or well, Abyssinia was able to take Italian Somaliland, which permanently took $1 from the Italians. But they were also able to, well, France was able to funnel a lot of their IPPs to Abyssinia, knowing that it would become Free French eventually. And I think giving that up is definitely worth the risk of sending these 6 units into Abyssinia on the first turn. But no, Italy did have a tough game. Well, apart from its godlike tech rules, they had a tough game trying to get into the war. But I think there are some things that he could have done differently. I know he said that when Italy goes to war, Rome becomes, well, very undefended and very vulnerable. And that is definitely true. However, I think he could have. What Italy can do is, well, when they declare war, and assuming that the U.S. isn't in the vicinity, which I wasn't, Italy can declare war and take something, and Germany can then move into Italy and defend the key areas. For example, Germany could rail 4 infantry down to this land zone or Rome, as well as fly in. Must have been half a dozen air transports. He could fly in 6 infantry to Rome and maybe fly down some planes, and that would pretty much guarantee, at least for the short term, Italy being defended. And even if Italy doesn't go to war, there's more things he could have done with his fleet. He could have loaded them up with a couple Marines and just gone for a stroll out here and maybe threaten the USA. Sure, I mean, probably nothing can really. You probably couldn't take Washington D.C., but that would force the Allies to, worry about that and maybe build some units to defend Ottawa or Washington, and that is another way, to keep the Allies on their toes and, out of the Pacific. But yeah, let's see. So yeah, that's the only really suggestions I have for Italy this game is, find some way to enter the war without immediately being crushed. Skirmish with your fleet, move it around, keep the Allies moving with you, and using Germany to really defend, Italy. And now we will talk about the USA. So I, playing the USA, made a couple errors this game I wanted to go over. Apart from what I mentioned earlier about the Marshall Islands and not taking that island, which really put my fleet in a really vulnerable position, which I was lucky to live through. There's also in this turn, I left these 3 transports undefended, except for a jet fighter that could scramble. And this was just an oversight on my part. You really do have to. This is a 3-person game, and you do have to watch for the inevitable Russian or common term betrayal of the Allies. And we really should have considered the Germans making a deal with them and to give up or to pull out of some parts of Russia in order to take out these transports. And the Russians taking those out really, really dampened uh, the US's ability to reinforce the landings in Spain. Um, I also made some rule mistakes. I lend-leased a strategic bomber to the KMT before I was actually allowed to. According to the Himalayan air hump rules, any lend-lease that's going over this road kind of dies on a 10, 11, or 12. So we did roll for that, and luckily it lived through that. And then also another final mistake I made was I used KMT troops on American transports in the same turn. And even though that once KMT is a major power, they can attack together, I guess there's no provision for allowing KMT troops to board and attack off American transports in the same turn. So I used a lot of KMT units to take these three territories from Japan. I'm not too sure if that won us the game. I think I ended up first striking at least 2 territories, but if I played that correctly, I think there's a chance that Honshu could have held out. But yeah, that's the kind of things I wanted to go over as the USA, and I think with that, that's my long rant of what I thought about the mistakes that were made. But each mistake is a learning opportunity, and you know, and that's how you get better at this game is just making mistakes and seeing how people react to them and how you would do better the next time. So with that, I'll say adieu to everyone. Be sure to check in our Operation Goldeneye and see myself play as the Comintern and, well, see how that works out. All right, have a good day and have a good one. Bye.